Welcome to the Ayn Rand Fan Club. I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig. How are you today, William?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good. And we're thrilled to have Sunny back in the studio. Welcome back, Sunny.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. This is episode 100. We originally had this plan for, doing some best of clips, making it happy, but just with all the news going on and frankly, everything going on with immigration and just what even people in the movement have been saying, we felt it would be kind of remiss not to focus on that.
Well, congratulations anyway, guys. That's a big achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
5 years.
Yeah, it's been an amazing 100 episodes, and I look forward to 100 more. And this is a special episode, in my opinion, because we're going to get into a very important issue regarding immigration and customs enforcement. So ICE agents and the whole debate we have going now in the Objectivist movement and all throughout the liberty movement about what is ICE? Are they a valid law enforcement agency? What should we think about the Renee Good shooting? And all of the different objectivists who have an opinion about this, including what I consider to be the most intellectual of them all, is Harry Binswanger, who has written an article about ICE. He thinks that ICE, is not a legitimate law enforcement agency and that it should be countered or at least protested. You shouldn't even, acknowledge them or obey their orders, in his opinion. So we're going to get into all of that. We're also going to talk about some clips from Onkar and Agustina from the Ayn Rand Institute. They have opinions about it, as well as a couple clips from Yaron Brook and possibly one from Craig Biddle. So that's what we have in store for you. I hope you enjoy it.
Hey, well, let's jump right in. So, Harry wrote a recent piece on his Substack, and this guy's always been for open borders. I mean, he basically was against checkpoints, but now in the face of what's happened, he wrote this piece called ICE versus the Rule of Law, Not of Men. And I just think that, just to quote him, he says, quote, independent of the disputed facts of the particular case, the Renee Good case, there's a faulty assumption. They're assuming that ICE is a law enforcement agency like the police, and it isn't. And I just, that just seems arbitrary. And he says specifically that, this is not an anarchic position, but that's just, you can decide to not pay attention to any law enforcement because you don't think that they're a valid agency. You could apply that to the FBI, and Onkar sort of does later on. And it's dangerous. I think it happens to, they're trying to show the left that they're on their side on immigration. And it's just, I mean, the idea that you would just tell people to go out there and not follow the instructions. I mean, that's ultimately what Renee Good's wife did, telling her to drive away when they were trying to arrest her. And that's the proximate cause of her death, to me. And so, and now we've got Harry just encouraging people to do it.
Yeah, this is a dangerous, in my view, an irresponsible position on Harry's part. He's encouraging people to think of ICE as not a legitimate law enforcement agency, when in fact they are enforcing federal laws. These are federal laws of immigration and customs, and they are agents of a federal agency. So they are officers, federal officers, and they are recognized as federal officers by pretty much every agency in America. And only the leftist insurgents don't recognize them, but they don't recognize federal officers anywhere. Like they don't even recognize local police. They they riot in the streets and block traffic in Los Angeles and give the local police all sorts of problems. So
Yeah, it's kind of a utopian. I feel like it comes from a place of utopia. Like in the perfect world, all men are perfect, and we have, you know what I'm saying? Like you don't need I mean, what is the definition of law enforcement? It's like these people, this agency said we need guys that are going to go in and arrest people because of the circumstances of the situation, and these are the laws, and we need people to do that. And then he's worried that they think for themselves, that they, it's like, but the average police guy on the street, your city cop, is also thinking for himself, and he's out there trying to enforce the law, and he's doing his best as a human being. So do you not trust him, or do you trust him? Do you not trust this one? And I mean, I think it's good to be skeptical of government in general, but you can't be irrational about it. So in this case, I don't know where he's getting that ICE is not law enforcement. If you Google that, or I mean, ask any AI, and it says that they are. Not that that's proof, but he has to prove that they're not, because they obviously are. They act like it, and they're enforcing federal law. So what, like, are we playing word games here just to delegitimize these guys that are out there trying to secure our border and get rid of these illegal criminals? So I don't know.
well, one problem is he engages in a lot of name calling. Like he'll call them goons, and like he says they're just loyal to President Trump.
He says the mob over and over. And I'm like, what mob is that? The American people? Like he actually refers to us as a mob in here. He goes,
Speaking of mobs,
he goes, the judiciary exists to interpret the law. It has no interest in catering to the White House or public opinion, which he puts in quotes, also known as the mob.
these Minneapolis.
Since when is public opinion the mob? And yet he says in this entire 6-page thing, he says not word one about the actual mob stopping citizens on the street and asking them for ID. Not a single word about that mob.
I want to address a
same
couple.
people from the 2020 mob of George Floyd, when they were saying stuff like all cops are bastards and defund the police. And, to him, that's not a mob. Those are just his muscle, I guess.
And then later, he refers to January 6th as a tribal civil war. Like, it's all partisan politics for him.
Well, I want to address a couple specific points he makes against ICE, because he does have this worry. He says that ICE is the nucleus of an elite presidential guard. And he also says that ICE makes up its own rules and is not part of American justice. So these are just ridiculous claims. And you can look up what ICE does and what they're loyal to. They take a pledge of loyalty, not to Trump, but to the Constitution. They pledge to uphold and defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, just like any federal officer. So you don't have to worry that these ICE agents are going to be loyal to Trump, who will be gone in 3 years. These agents are loyal to the Constitution, and they make that pledge. And this is a context that Harry just drops. He just forgets about this. It's as if he doesn't know how to actually use Google or AI. He claims to use AI to come up with, like what does ICE do and, versus what the police does. But he doesn't actually use it to figure out what is true about this agency. Like he could have looked up what federal laws they are enforcing. Like I looked it up, and there's this law, 18 USC section 111, and there's some other laws, I think, in there that they are enforcing. They're enforcing immigration laws. And also he makes this case for ICE being just this like rogue agency that does whatever the heck it wants, like some Hitler's goon squad or something. But that's not the case either. They can be taken to court, they can be held accountable by the Department of Justice, just like any other federal officer. You know, if they break the law, they're subject to the Constitution. They're subject to the Fourth Amendment.
The Congress can subpoena DHS and there's all kinds of remedies. Yeah, he acts like they're distinct. He acts like, I mean, I'm not a big fan of DHS. Like, I don't like that after 9/11, we got this new agency and so on. I don't like the FBI. I don't like the CIA. I don't like the IRS. Like, I get it, but I also believe, and I think we got to like widen the picture too, because immigration is federal law. It's not state law. It is properly federal law. We have one border for all of the states. Minnesota or whomever, Minneapolis, Tim Walz, Jacob Frey cannot just unilaterally decide for all Americans what the border is going to be or whether we have one or not. And they have. They've declared themselves a sanctuary city. And that means
sanctuary cities that just aren't following the law.
Yeah, and that is nullification. I mean, things have come up in our past as a country and honestly, if Minnesota wants to secede, they should properly do that. They shouldn't do this thing where they're challenging, I mean, first of all, the leaders of Minnesota they were about to be indicted for fraud. And when all this blew up, and it's like, it's obviously a ploy to distract and mobilize their own. They have a street army. These are the people who dropped a net on Minneapolis with spotters and license plate followers, and they were barricading streets, checkpoints, and they have an Antifa thug army, where they draw in people from all over the country when they want to, and they're funded.
Elected officials participating in signal chats to help,
signal chats. I mean, those people are not subject to Congress and to review and whatever else the mechanisms are in the federal government. And if the local police won't arrest them, then they don't get any. There's absolutely no consequences.
Well, that's another issue here, is that these ICE agents are not getting help from the local police, and that's a problem. Because then the ICE agents can't call for backup, and they are the ones then enforcing self-defense against these citizens who are blocking their path or blocking the roads or
throwing bricks at them and frozen bottles of water and pushing them, and the noise alone, that the racket they're making is intentional to escalate tensions. And yeah.
Well, there are many ways
the help are coming from Frey and from the mayor and the governor. It's not just like the cops just aren't helping.
Yeah, well, right. There's all kinds of voices, including Harry Binswanger, who are telling these people to resist ICE and not obey their orders, get in their way, block them, throw things at them. Well, everyone has a right to self-defense, including ICE agents. And it's also a federal crime to interfere with their activities, their lawful official activities and investigations. So if you're blocking their path, they have every right to detain you and arrest you and even take you to trial. And
but I thought see, this is where they're getting with, they're arresting citizens. Yeah, because the citizens are attacking them. And sometimes also a citizen can get caught up in a net with and these are usually criminals. They're at a door arresting a bunch of child molesters or drug dealers, and there's a citizen there, Well,
this is another context that Harry drops in his article, is that he claims, quote, anyone seized by ICE remains at the mercy of ICE or its parent agency, the Department of Homeland Security, which isn't true. If you're a citizen and you get detained by ICE, you have rights. You can prove that you're a citizen, and then you get your rights to a lawyer, rights to a trial, all of that. So,
but what he says is, well, they have to agree to give you your rights, and they're not going to agree because they have no oversight and they can do what they want. And
there's so much oversight. Everyone who knows you is going to be clamoring to the media. And, people, it's not like you just become a mystery and nobody knows what happens to you.
Well, but that's what they're projecting. And I've had friends suggest that citizen friends suggest that because they're brown skinned or something, that they could be black bagged and disappear. And it's like if that's where you're at, really, if that's what you believe, first of all, that's crazy because there's just absolutely no evidence of that happening. And the citizens who are arrested do prove they're citizens. I mean, mistakes get made. And let's say, for example, they got sent out of the country by accident. Are there no phones in El Salvador? Like, I mean, they get sent somewhere they can't call and go, I just got sent to freaking Guatemala, mom. Like, come get me. I mean, or the media call CNN. I just got deported and I'm a citizen. CNN would be all over that. So it's not happening. And they are saying it's happening. They're just making it up.
To me, it goes deeper than that because Harry actually says, and William found this clip from 2022 OCON, where he doesn't believe that non-citizens should be able to be taken by ICE.
And there's a green arrow going down from Oklahoma. Same state, Texas, has an open border with Oklahoma. And here's what you see instead of those bars coming from Oklahoma. Welcome to Texas. Drive friendly the Texas way. Now, it should say, welcome to America. And that should be the only thing. There's no guardhouse there to get from Oklahoma to Texas. There shouldn't be anything but a sign at every port of entry, every inch of the border that we share with Mexico or Canada. And that is a radical position, but I'm going to move you towards it if you're not there already.
Did you watch that lecture, William? I mean, I read his big piece on that where he says there should be no checkpoint. There should just be a welcome sign. I read that years ago and I was not persuaded.
Yeah, no, I'm quite familiar with what Harry Binswanger has written and said on this subject. He basically is saying there we shouldn't have any guard posts or patrols of the border, just like you don't have guards at state lines, but that's not really true. I remember coming into California from Nevada once, and they check you to see if you're bringing in fruit from out of state because there was a problem with some sort of insect on the fruits. So there are situations where they check you, and even if there's like an escape prisoner running around, they'll set up checkpoints at county lines or state lines. So that's not true. Even in the interior of the United States, we have police patrolling the streets and looking for suspicious activity. They can pull you over if you're acting suspicious or you're in a stolen car or something. So it's a crazy position to say that the border with Mexico should be the same as the border between states in the United States. It's an even more difficult job to stop suspects and find people who might be causing trouble in the United States coming from Mexico. You need to have ports of entry, like official ports of entry, where people can come through and be checked before they enter the country. And then when you're doing that, it's suspicious to avoid the ports of entry. Why is someone avoiding our ports of entry? That's suspicious on its face. And so then you have Border Patrol agents who are looking for people trying to sneak into this country, acting suspicious, and then they need to be checked out as well. So I just find Harry's position to be untenable, incoherent. First, he doesn't want any guards anywhere, but then he also somehow wants you to check for security threats. So, like, how are you supposed to check for certain security threats if there's no guards? So it
Well,
just
I
doesn't make
think he say that once they're here, then you check them, and then it's like, well, but you don't want ICE. So, he doesn't want
Even
agents going around arresting criminals if one is figured out, which is what ICE is doing right now. They know that is a criminal, that we have a warrant for their deportation. They have committed crimes in addition to jumping our border. And we're going to their house where we know where we think they're living based on their phone data or whatever, and we're going to get them. Well, Harry doesn't want them to be able to do that.
you made a good point earlier about how utopian it is. It's like he's imagining this kind of future capitalist world where we don't have borders, and frankly, the world is just one giant superstate. Because
I always like to call Harry's view the Star Trek view of Earth.
and it just
well,
it,
it's the
it
Pollyannish view where everyone's a peaceful person crossing the border. We don't
Everyone
have to.
believes in free markets and the First Amendment, and
They're coming here for the right
his
reason.
view was policy, and in late 23, early 24, when we saw those people massed up against the border, and Biden's people didn't even want to do anything about it. I mean, people voted on how much they wanted open immigration, and they rejected Harry's view.
yeah. I saw a statistic the other day that 80% of Americans, literally 80%, want illegals deported, all illegals.
I wanted to make the connection here. Like, why are we talking about Harry's open borders policy? I think it's connected to his current position on ICE. If you don't want guards or border patrols on the Mexican-American border, then it naturally follows that ICE agents must be in the wrong because they're the ones who enforce border controls. So if you're against guards at the border, then you have to be against ICE. So what I think needs to happen, especially in the objectivist movement, is we need to have a very strong argument in favor of border control and then therefore ICE. And we don't really have that right now, because one problem here is that that Harry Binswanger has this intellectual argument that's rooted in something Ayn Rand said about property, and that is that there's no such thing as public property. Her definition of capitalism rejected the idea of public property and said all property is private. So if there's no public property, then there should be no ports of entry, and everyone should just, be allowed to come across the border. And, if you're a private
how is
citizen,
that? Because that's private land then.
To deal with some sympathetic
I
owner or
guess,
something.
yeah, okay. So like Charlie, my neighbor, can decide to let in 50,000 Chinese.
yeah, so this is the part where it's incoherent, right? Because if all property is private, then in theory, every private property owner could reject immigrants and say no trespassing, and you wouldn't have any immigration.
That's kind of the libertarian anarchy position where everybody has everything's private, everyone makes their own decisions, everyone has private security, private armies, private checkpoints. It's like that is the sort of, and I've always thought that position just would lead to basically a dictatorship, as some stronger person would just start collecting all the property. And that is, to me, that's the anarchy position.
Yeah, so if you reject the anarchy position, then Harry Binswanger must accept public property. We have to have public property for ports of entry. So government-run property will allow entry into America, and then you have public roads which allow them to travel throughout the nation freely, and you have public parks which allow them to get like water and rest or relaxation or whatever, and so on and so forth. You need public property for immigration to be insured to like
Might be able to
make
have an easement for government property that was on or for private property that was on a border for them to conduct enforcement. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It does fall apart and it's incoherent. I I want to switch gears a little bit because I think he's influenced other people in the movement. We had Agustina and Onkar talking about the Renee Good shooting after it happened. And, I mean, Agustina's an immigrant, and, I'm sure that may affect. But one of my points is that Harry and anyone who takes that open borders position, there's almost none of them that are like, yeah, I think that was a fair self-defense shoot. It's like the more you think that it's, you're for open borders, there's like no way you can let yourself see it as a legitimate shoot. And it's colored by the fact that you don't think ICE should exist. So how could they have a good shoot? But in this clip with Agustina and Onkar, Agustina, to me, she starts out by doing like a faux steelman of the pro-ICE view before basically saying there's no other way to see things but hers.
Some people, including the Trump administration, say that the shooting was justified because the agent shot her in self-defense and that she was actually trying to run him over. So by shooting her, he saved his life and the life of the other agents. And other people, I mean, there's like some nuance and differences in different ways that people see it, but others, including myself, think that the shooting was completely unjustified, that Renee Good was actually trying to escape the ICE agent, not run him over, and that basically my position at the moment is that there is no universe in which one could conclude that this was justified at all. Or even, this may be a little bit debatable too, but I don't think one can give the agent the benefit of the doubt about what happened there. And I don't think he did this in self-defense. And I think that he actually shot to kill.
Of course he shot to kill. Like, of course
That's
he
what you
did.
do
I
when
mean,
you
does
feel
she not
threatened.
understand how it works over here? By the way, in her home country, I'd like to see what would happen if she tried to escape a federal agent. But here, if an officer shoots, he's shooting to kill. There isn't like I'm shooting to wound. That they're not trained to wound. They're trained to kill. And if you get into a situation where you are putting their life in danger, potentially, and they see it that way, they could reasonably see it that way. Actually, their bar is reasonably, because they have to make decisions in a split second. And it's very easy with 10 surround cameras after the fact, slowing it down like a freaking football instant replay. Very easy to see that and have a different opinion than the officer. But imagine you're that guy. And the best thing I've seen on that was Tim Pool did a slow down thing or whatever. And he showed that what she did was she backed up and then she gunned it. So there was an officer on either side, not in front of the car. She backed up. All of a sudden, this officer is now in front of the car. She guns it, but she slips on ice, and her tire goes. Zzz. Then she turns the wheels and goes like that. So she first tried to ram it straight into him, facing just directly at him, and then turned the wheels and caught him on the side. So if you're that guy, you saw that, you're in front of the car and you see that she gunned it and miraculously she caught ice. So that's pretty scary. I mean, if you're that guy, that's pretty scary. And you don't resist arrest.
I think there's been plenty of commentary on the justification of the shooting. Obviously, you don't try to drive your car towards an ICE agent when they're telling you to get out of the car. Even if there's just someone, some police officer telling you to do that, you don't move your car. You put your car in park and get out, or at least just stay in the car and let them pull you out.
Even if you do that at a citizen who's carrying, you might get shot.
But with a federal officer, I mean, you get into really serious trouble when you deal with federal officers and you break the law and impede their investigation. And these people know what they're doing. These are organized agitators, rioters. They know what they're doing. They know that they're dealing with ICE agents. They're following them around. They're tracking them.
They also are trying to create incidents that they can film and then get them in trouble with.
One of
And
the ridiculous things I heard was that she didn't know, like one of Harry Binswanger's arguments is that you don't know, or maybe it was Yaron Brook, like you're in fear of your life. You don't know who they are. These are masked people, and you don't know if they're real agents or whatever. This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. These people know what they're dealing with. Also, I wanted to say something about Agustina because I'm really surprised. This was the first time I've actually seen a very emotional, unmeasured, like just ridiculous response to this. Like it was the first time she saw the video and had this visceral, emotional reaction. And she says there's no universe where you could conclude this was a justified shooting. I mean, and then Onkar later has to put her in her place, right? After a couple minutes of dancing around, he finally says that he thinks it would meet the legal requirements for a justified shooting. But initially, Agustina sounds completely emotional and like doesn't know like what universe she's in.
The no universe sentiment comes up a lot. People basically saying there's no other way to see this. And Yaron said, no honest person could think Renee Good was self-defense. Then for Preddy, he said the evidence was even more convincing. So
the same thing was said about George Floyd. And a man is currently rotting in prison unjustly, the cop that was Chauvin. He was trained to do that move, and the guy on the guy died of a drug overdose. So it's like it's
she
absolutely.
says, I won't give the agent the benefit of the doubt. I mean, so much for the presumption of innocence.
Exactly. I mean, but that is an American tradition, presumption of innocence, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the Ayn Rand Institute is supposed to be an intellectual organization, like based on a philosophy, and so. Why are they permitting such ridiculous emotion-based rhetoric? I mean, some of this should be checked. Aren't they preparing for these podcasts? Why don't they have prepared points that aren't so ridiculous?
Part of the problem is I think they don't write anymore. They don't write anymore. Have you noticed that? Like when I was young, Objectivists, and Harry does. Harry wrote this. And Harry wrote his piece on open borders. He writes. All those old guys write, but none of these new people write, including Onkar. What does he write? Something like once a year. So they're not, if you don't write, you are not being intellectual because you can't process your thoughts without writing.
Well, it sounded like Onkar had some prepared points, and he had a more measured take on it. But he had to deal with Agustina, who gave her wild accusation in the beginning. And then he had to, kind of pander to her and like dance around the points before finally challenging her and like contradicting her.
Oh, I just want to point out too that Harry said in his little lecture clip that you posted, he said, this is the radical position. Like he admits this is wild. This is a wild position and I'm going to persuade you to it. But he admits that this is not in place in any nation in the entire world, nor has it ever been. His open borders idea.
With the radical left position. But to this next clip, William, to your point, Onkar disagreed, at least at first.
Well, could mean, 9 out of 10 agents wouldn't have shot. But one did, and he was scared and he feared for his life. So my guess is if this was investigated, it would satisfy the legal requirements. And in that sense, so if unjustified means if it was investigated, it would clearly be labeled an unjustified shooting by the agent from a legal standpoint. I'm dubious to it, but like, I'm certainly no expert. you would have to look at all the evidence. This is part of the argument of why it should be investigated. And we should talk about that as well, the fact that it looks like it will not be investigated. So, but having said that, I still find it deeply disturbing. And part of the context one has to think about is just what these ICE agents are, what they're doing, and the fact that they're not acting like police. And I think there's been a deep reason why they're not acting like police. But if you ask, were they trying to de-escalate the situation? I think the answer has to be no.
So these armchair federal agents are telling us that they should have de-escalated cars blocking their ability to do their job, to leave. They're basically blocked in and kidnapped by these people, and they're supposed to de-escalate. And, it's all just weird that they think that I don't, this is also, I feel there's a disconnect from people, including Harry. They don't understand that law enforcement is violence. And if you're going to insert yourself into an arrest, you're getting involved in a violent situation, potentially. And that's why they have guns and all that stuff, because it's violent. And these are tough men, usually. Thank God, because thank God we have masculine, tough men willing to go in there with guns and risk their lives to arrest these foreign illegal criminals. And they want it to be like all like, I don't know what. I mean, like, if we just ask nicely, they'll leave. No, they're there to obstruct. They are there to do that obstruction job. And the only thing that's going to stop them is violence. They're committing force. They're initiating force in this case.
Well, first of all, I want to commend Onkar a little bit for recognizing that this probably is a legitimate shooting within the legal requirements, or whatever he thinks the legal requirements are.
The way he said that was so passive, though, wasn't it? It was like...
It's very passive. It was very pandering to Agustina, because he's got to deal with this emotional lady who is clearly taking a wild, crazy stance. And so he's trying to maybe walk her down from the wild cliff edge that she's standing on. With his 2 minutes, he gave like 2 minutes worth of like talking, about it, the whole situation, before he finally admitted that it was a justified shooting, or possibly a justified shooting. But also regarding the de-escalation, we've heard this before, right? Where the police are supposed to de-escalate. This is a leftist talking point. It's meant to, I think, recontextualize police force. It's like, you're not supposed to be a police force anymore. You're supposed to be these like...
Yeah, it's defund the police and send out the social worker.
Social worker mentality, where you talk someone down from the edge, or the cliff edge.
It's just a reality is there are people out there that are bad people. It's like a weird negation of that.
Also, one way to de-escalate a situation is to end it. So the police are also trained to shoot in self-defense, to stop a threat. And one way to stop a threat is to shoot that person if you have to. And if you've told this person to get out of the car repeatedly and they're not complying, and then they start moving their car toward you, well, if you're in fear for your life, you really only have one option left. You have to shoot that person to stop them.
Harry said,
decided to
Renee,
arrest. You can't de-escalate, or everyone learns to just flee arrest. I mean, I've seen bad shoots of cops, while someone was running away, but that's not what happened here. She was driving recklessly enough that at least one agent thought she was trying to kill him.
She actually did hit him.
Right.
Yeah, she sideswiped him, but only after he kind of like tried to get out of the way and shooting at her while shooting at her. So there's all kinds of context here that, people are dropping. One, it was also a very icy situation where footing wasn't stable. You were talking about the car tires spinning. So the car could have just slid out of control. There's all kinds of contextual issues here going on, which the ICE agent may have been thinking in the back of his mind. And he's got to wonder.
There's also a process for there are bad shootings sometimes, right? And there is a process for it. And Onkar says there's no justice. So they just aren't accountable. And Harry brings that up a lot too, that there's zero accountability and they can just shoot people and they get away with it.
And like, why are they shouting at her to get out of the car? It could be because they know they have no police backup. They can't rely on the Minneapolis police to come help them. So they have to deal with the situation themselves. Imagine if you were just a regular citizen pulling up in the situation. We've seen people drive through protesters now because they're in fear of their life. These protesters well, not really protesters, and I got to get out of the habit of calling them that. They are insurrectionists or rioters, agitators, and we see them mobbing people in their cars and then people running them over because they've got to get out of that situation. Well, it's the same deal with ICE agents who have the same responsibility to defend their lives. And so if they see a situation like this and they think they're being ambushed or might be ambushed by these crazy people, they got to deal with that situation the best way they see possible.
And the Alex Preddy shooting is another one where it's kind of unclear. It's one of these, and I think they're trying to create incidents. Obviously, that guy was out there physically attacking ICE the week before on video, and he's trying to create an incident and agitate them, and he's violent with them. And he's being encouraged to be violent with them by his trainers. And she was also part of that, officially being trained by people. She didn't just show up, like she didn't wake up and go, I'm going to go. She dropped her kid off at ICE agitator daycare and then went, so it's Harry says, Renee had no moral obligation to obey the orders. I don't agree with that. I mean, I think, first of all, as a United States citizen, unless you've decided it's revolution time, in which case I don't agree with that. And I don't think that's a moral choice right now. But also she had 3 children. So what was was she morally obligated not to antagonize federal officers and maybe get herself shot and leave her 3 kids orphaned? I mean, Harry's just dropping all kinds of context.
Well, in this next clip, Onkar invokes Harry to try to make the case for ICE not being a legitimate police force, but more like a dictatorship without checks on its power.
ICE is, I think the way that Dr. Binswanger put it in the article, it's like the enforcement agents of an administrative agency. And so calling them agents in part captures that. And that is too much. They set the rules, they then execute on the rules, and then they judge if they followed the rules or not. That's what happens in an authoritarian regime or in a dictatorship. It cannot happen in the US form of government. So if they're the ones deciding, oh, yeah, there's nothing to investigate here, so we're not even going to investigate anything. And you can look from the outside, like, how is that possible? How are they the ones deciding if this should be investigated or not? And I think that's part of what you find unbelievable about this. It's how can they be the ones deciding if what they did accorded with the law or not? And how can they be the ones deciding, well, yeah, we might open an investigation or we might not open an investigation? And this is the part where the sort of independence of the FBI and the DOJ is a real issue. That, yeah, they're part of the executive branch, but if they make all the decisions about even, like, we're going to open an investigation and so on, then you've got too much that all the parts of the government that should be separate. And the checks and balance in part means one aspect of the government is checking the other aspect.
Worried about the DOJ and FBI having too much executive power. I mean, I never heard him concerned when Biden's DOJ was being directed to launch warfare on Trump and even social media companies.
Remember when Biden's DOJ was going after parents at school board meetings?
Yeah, it's interesting that are only making an issue of this now when Trump is in power.
It's because they're leftists.
The problem seems to be the Trump derangement syndrome that's running rampant through these objectivists at ARI. They think Trump is a dictator. They think that the government, all of these federal officers are just loyal to Trump and not the Constitution, and they aren't falling under the rules or the laws of the Constitution and the various amendments, and they aren't being checked by anyone in Congress or the judicial branch or the DOJ. The fact is that they are being checked. There are lawsuits. How did this guy who was sent to some other country, how did he get returned? I mean, there are checks in the legal system. If a mistake happens, then there can be lawsuits. And citizens, if there's mistakes with citizens, they're entitled to lawyers, and they can prove their citizenship. And then they fall under, some other jurisdiction, and have rights. It's not like ICE is just a Gestapo who's only responsible or reports to Hitler or something like that, or Trump as a Hitler. This isn't the case. This is a fantasy. We're dealing with objectivists who live in a fantasy of their own making. It's their own nightmare that they've imposed on their own mind, and it's crazy. They don't have any proof for it, so they end up rationalizing everything, like ICE isn't a law enforcement agency who you should obey, and they're causing trouble, because then these ideas are spreading, and people are believing that they don't have to obey the law. They are the ones who are against, the law, the rule of law.
And zero fear over the signal chats, the spotter net, the running license plates of people, regular, not even ICE agents, but just regular people, and following them and harassing them, journalists being followed and harassed, hotels being attacked by mobs of Antifa. No discussion about that being concerning. Why do the Democrats have the ability to drop a net over Minneapolis in the way that they've done? It is terrifying, and it's not an official.
If ICE is the Gestapo, is the way they look at it, they love what the left is doing in Minneapolis.
But it's not like it looks like, ICE is a Gestapo and these are people resisting. What it looks like is that Walz and Frey dropped a net, right? I mean, that these are well-funded, well-organized, previously organized, pulling in people from all over the country that are aligned with this very, very left-wing, communist, revolutionary philosophy. And Antifa is there, and there's no fear of that. And I could take them more seriously if they said, I'm afraid of both of these things, but they don't. They're only afraid of the official ICE, and it is because they don't like Trump, and they also don't agree with borders. So it's just purely partisan politics.
Onkar didn't hurt his credibility enough with that previous clip. Onkar then brings up the case of Tufts University Rumeysa Ozturk, who was detained in March of 2025 by ICE. They accused her of being part of violent Hamas protests. She said it was more just about writing an op-ed, and it probably was a bad detain. In fact, a bunch of Jewish groups called for her release. It was questionable, but Onkar seems to think she should have taken the law into her own hands.
How is she supposed to know that she's not being abducted? She's not being carried away. It's not some, but she's Muslim. Who cares? It's not some Muslim who's a moderate Muslim, and ISIS is coming after her And yeah, they don't shoot her dead. They're going to whisk her off to somewhere. They might put her on camera, and they like to do executions on camera. And so, like, how is she supposed to know that that's not what's happening? And in that video, there's bystanders. What are you doing? Oh, we're the police. And the bystander rightly says, you don't look like the police, and you're wearing masks. And if you were like, think of Charlie Hebdo, and this is what happened. The people like this came in, and they don't just shoot you dead. How are they supposed to know? Like, is this the police, or is this now Islamic terrorists who are going to whisk us off somewhere? And you couldn't, like, I think she would have been justified if she was of the people for the Second Amendment and concealed carry. I think she would have been justified in shooting all the agents.
You know how you can know that Islamic terrorists aren't bursting into your offices wearing the garb of federal agents is if you don't let them into your country.
Well, it's ridiculous that, I mean, this is a Muslim, immigrant. Why is ISIS going to come in and like take her because she's not properly covered or something?
I mean, he has a point. Like, if people come, when the SWAT team comes to your door, you don't know, they just barge in. You don't know they're coming. And it's scary. And I would assume that a lot of people, they end up getting, this is why swatting is so dangerous. When people call the police on, like, oh, there's a person there with a gun and they're holding someone hostage, or this happens to right wingers all the time. It doesn't happen to the left. It happens to the right. And what happens is they don't know that they're cops, and they pull a gun and they end up shot and killed. So it does happen like that. And he's right that that's a problem, but I don't know how you solve that problem.
Well, first of all,
tell them to shoot the agents for starters. I mean, he tries saying they're like Charlie Hebdo terrorists, but they detain instead of kill. I mean, that's a lot different. He's just taking Harry's premise to its conclusion that, and it seems like objectivism is for shooting the agents.
It's just a made up scenario. I mean,
it is a made up scenario, but what actually he's referring to a real scenario, but he's kind of like fantasizing it a little bit. But what is his point? Like, is this an argument for abolishing ICE, or is it an argument for better policing or better tactics? Obviously there's going to be a learning curve here where they have to learn how to take people without scaring them or like causing problems. And this is, first of all, I don't think this incident resulted in a problem, did it? I mean, they took her without incident, right? So,
and she ended up being released. I mean,
yeah,
there was a mechanism for her to protest what had happened.
And I don't know the exact details, like if they announced their presence when they entered and said, this is ICE, or, wherever, announced themselves. But he's just saying that it's scary to be taken by masked
law
people.
Enforcement. Yeah, right. Yeah. People, no matter whether it's ISIS or law enforcement. So I guess if they weren't wearing masks, you could tell that they were the good guys.
Yeah, so like bad guys don't take you without masks. So it's like, it doesn't really matter how they are attired, right? It's your relationship to people wearing masks. So if you live in the cold climate where people regularly wear masks, then you wouldn't be surprised that ICE agents are wearing
That's why
baklava.
the COVID year was so scary. Everybody was wearing masks.
Yeah, but I mean like full face coverings. So like if you're wearing,
I'm just making a joke. I mean, everybody's walking around like this for a whole year.
So if you're in Florida, they're probably wearing shorts. I imagine do Muslim terrorists wear shorts ever? I don't know.
Well, maybe if the ICE agents wore like Hawaiian shirts, it would be maybe a little friendlier.
Yeah, but I guess the point is that
it's all about what they're wearing. It's their clothing.
Onkar needs to
politicians dox. We've seen politicians dox these people and their families. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's why DEA agents, even if I'm against the war on drugs, I understand them wanting to be masked because they have these drug lords that are going after their families. And now it's Minnesota politicians doing it.
Yeah, I mean, we understand that, but they don't care about that. You know, they don't care about the details or the context. So they're just making these rationalizations and they're living in their own fantastical headspace.
It is so fantastical because they never think of the consequences of what they're saying. And you're right, his point is no law enforcement. Or like, let's send a howler first, like a Harry Potter howler. And then if they respond to that, then maybe I mean, it's the consequences of having no police are that you have very serious violent criminals running around your country. And if you don't have a border, you have very serious criminals and potentially even a whole army of people from another foreign nation just walking across your border. And that is the death of all the citizens of the country. So it's just a disconnect from consequences in reality.
I think what we're dealing with is a very effective ICE agency. And that's the real problem they have with ICE is that they're effective. And what happens with
when Biden pretended to care about the border or Obama pretended to care, it's when they're actually following the laws on the books that now it's a crisis.
And now they point to, a couple episodes that are questionable because there's a shooting and you always want to avoid unnecessary killing, but they're dealing with these rioters, basically insurrectionists. And you have to expect that there's going to be some conflicts there and people may get hurt because ICE agents aren't in the business of getting into fisticuffs with people. They're just going to take you down. They're going to take out the threat with minimal threat to their own harm, their bodily harm. They don't want to get hurt. They don't want to get dragged by a car.
Again, law enforcement is violence, and the regular cops have shootings that are questionable sometimes or, gray areas in the act of their duties. And so it's just really the same thing. And I think you're right. It's fundamentally they're against the law, the immigration law in general, and they're against Trump because they weren't complaining when ICE was doing its job under Biden. There were no complaints. And another thing that's going on is that these sanctuary cities are not cooperating. And then Trump's like, well, fine, we'll go in and get the people. We will have to just send a bunch of people to do it. They've arrested 4,000 criminal aliens already in Minneapolis. 4,000 criminals.
They claim it's hardly any criminals, and now it's just people like disorderly conduct, which, I tend not to trust a lot of these stats, especially when they're coming from liberal media. But I do want to switch gears. Yaron talked about the second shooting, and a little bit in, he ends up using this straw man about the right who are ready to sacrifice themselves for the cross to rationalize his current sanction of the left.
Reality, there's just not that many people who are ready yet to go sacrifice themselves for the nation and for the cross. And there's real opposition in this sense. The left serves a good purpose, at least in the short run, as actually opposing what the right is doing. So, I mean, right now in Minneapolis, if you oppose ICE, you rely on the left to go out into the streets and be the opposition. So, I mean, you've got to rally with the left on the issue of ICE. And I do.
What an issue it is, right? Rally with the left in opposing ICE, which in essence is opposing federal law enforcement.
Constitutionally granted federal law. This isn't like some new thing. This is immigration law, which is properly a federal, area. That's what he's going to make common cause, not just with the left, but the militant, violent left, the communist revolutionaries, the Bolsheviks. Oh, let's make common cause with them. Let's provide them with as much help and intellectual ammunition as we can provide. I mean, I can't even think of a reason why I would ever do that. I can't think of a single, even a good, worthy cause. I would never make common cause with those people.
Rule it out in any context, depending on how things changed over time, but not just, I mean, he's making common cause with these people that are against law enforcement. And, you know, being, it's ridiculous
they are not against law enforcement. They're against our law enforcement.
They're against the United States. The left is basically a communist group. They're insurrectionists. They're here to take down America. They're against American values, the American system. They want to impose socialism. And this is what Yaron wants us to rally around.
And by the way, they own everything. They own the media. They own, like, they've encircled us. And we're fighting for our lives against that and eventuality at this point. And he's like, oh, let's just join him for the immigration issue, which is he's on the wrong side of.
It's not just
to join with them all along.
Yeah, I believe that too.
It's not just being like for immigrants or for open immigration. He's saying we rely on them in the streets to go out in the streets and fight our battle for us. You know, he's saying, let's go rally around the insurrectionists again that are battling against ICE in the streets. That's something different than having some philosophical argument that is, you know, against ICE.
He's supporting the violence and he's supporting them getting shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In this next clip, this includes a question from a later show where he's asked about calling vetting authoritarian, which he claims he didn't say just before the clip of him saying it.
No, I didn't call basic vetting authoritarian. I said there's an argument that vetting isn't, you know, in a completely free society, real vetting is a violation of rights. I mean, vetting is the essence of authoritarianism. Vetting for what? I mean, anyway.
I mean, it's just say it's authoritarian. The essence of authoritarianism.
He has such a habit of doing that. I've seen other video montages people have made where he's just flip-flopping. And that's how he gets away with everything. He says the worst shit, never writes anything down. And then when anyone calls him on, he's like, I didn't say that. I said this. Because he said it all.
He's done so much live streaming that it's basically just brainstorming at this point. He's just constantly talking out of his ass. And then he doesn't remember what he said a week earlier. So did you notice after he said vetting is the essence of authoritarianism, he like starts to look around thinking, is that right? What I just said, is that correct? He doesn't know because he's like, well, anyway. Basically, anyway is his whatever. You know, people who don't know what they're talking about, they'll say whatever.
What that pushed him on vetting, and in fact, even Yaron's audience start questioning him about the vetting.
Point on vetting. I get that it can be a sign of authoritarian, but isn't it reasonable at some point? Well, here's the point that Harry Binswanger makes, which right now I'm sympathetic. I'm sympathetic to, primarily in the face of what ICE is doing, in the face of everybody opposing immigration. It's making me more radical, I guess. By what right do you vet? Like somebody's crossing the border and you stop them and say, I want to vet you. By what right? Unless there's some reasonable doubt to stop them and to actually demand information from them, they have a right to liberty, which means the right to move, the right to go, the right to engage. So what is it that gives you the right to stop them? As an individual, you don't have that right. And so I don't know why a state does.
They like to switch from foreign policy to domestic policy, like dealing with citizens should be the same as dealing with foreigners. They just flip flop all the time on that one. And it's obviously that's just because some people are citizens and some people are not citizens. And by what right? The fact that it's ours, and also the point of my gun, because that's reality. Reality is that people form groups, they form governments, the inland in a jurisdiction, and they say, we're going to keep out all the other people with our guns or our spears or whatever level you're at. And if you can enforce that, you get to control the border. If you can't, you don't.
We can't do that privately, but I mean, property rights is private vetting. It's
And
saying,
we do. If you break into my home on my land, I can shoot you.
I'm going to
So
vet you.
I think this is the most important question here. And Yaron's asking a very important question. By what right do you vet these people? And I think I have an answer, and I'd like to offer an answer because nobody in the objectivist movement seems to be giving this answer. And in fact, Harry Binswanger denies that you have this right. But the right comes from the group ownership of land. And this comes from the fact that several people can own a property, can buy property, and then you all share in that property and you manage that property. And then people develop a town as a group. That's a group ownership of land. And you patrol the border of your town and you manage the town. And then it can spread out from there to like a city or a nation, a state or a nation. And then you have national boundaries, and you extend the right to patrol your own property to the national border. And so it's an extension of your right to manage your own land and allow people on or deny people access. But it's also, you can also look at it in terms of your right to self-defense. We also delegate our right to self-defense to the police. And so part of that is the police patrolling your city limits or your state lines or your national boundaries for suspicious activity. And if people are not entering through your ports of entry, that's suspicious activity. And you need to stop them and check them because you want to know who's coming into your jurisdiction. Like, do they have diseases, or are they carrying weapons? Are they criminals? That sort of thing. You just need to have a basic understanding of who's in your land and who's crossing through your border. You can extend private rights, individual rights to property and self-defense to your representatives in the government. And that's a natural extension, which even Ayn Rand recognized. Ayn Rand recognized the right to self-defense, and that you extend that right to the police force. And then you give the police force the right to stop and detain people, check them out, see if they're committing crimes or they might be a threat to your community, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of a blank out of like, what is government? Because maybe we're so big that they think of it as it's just so big they can't get their head around it. But if you think about how it started, and you've got a group of people, elected people, they make a decision, we're going to form a government, a United States, and we're going to have, this is the boundary, like it freaking belongs to us. And the moral is the practical, and an open border is suicide. It is suicide for the inhabitants, because all manner of criminal and the stuff that goes on. I don't know if you've ever read any of these stories of the grooming gangs out of the UK, or the just horrific things that happened over there. Like, these are crimes at a level that we never used to see in our societies. This is not something our culture, not even our most psychopathic, does. And it's like done
at fight the police.
Well, do you know what I'm saying though? Like, the third world cultures produce a certain level of callous criminality, brutality that we don't have here. We don't have in the West, and we're importing it. When you watch the videos of ISIS putting people in cages and putting them on fire and just these sort of horrific, barbaric crimes.
Against bringing people over, even if they're from backward cultures, but there has to be a spigot so that our culture and our values remain dominant, the ones that make them want to come here in the first place.
Yeah, we have a right to have a cap
fraud
on,
because that's like more accepted in Somali areas or whatever
but
it is.
It literally is suicide. And so any policy that would lead to your death, your child's, like the destruction of your child's whole future, cannot possibly be the moral thing to do.
I'm gonna go back for a moment because Yaron says that it's people being against immigration is why he's adopted Harry's more radical position, which is just some dodge of, really it's just that Harry laid down the law for, the authority that has the Ayn Rand connection now that they've, gone away from Peikoff. And so now everyone's just rallying around Harry and his favoritism for the left.
Well, I think Harry's the only one who has some crumb of intellectualism in this debate, and he has a small basis in objectivism because Ayn Rand was against, public property. So if you're against public property, you got to be against these ports of entry and guard posts and things like that.
But she said so many other things that lead you to, she was very pro-America, pro-American culture. She thought it was unique. She thought that people abroad in the third world were savages and said so. There's so many things she said, and she lived in a time when immigration was mostly European. So, or Eastern European too.
Well, look, she was for codes of etiquette on city streets. So there's a lot to go on in objectivism, and she wasn't against all forms of policing your community. So I think she would be for border control. She would have found her error, I think, in this in the realm of public property. She would have figured it out, and she would have realized that having no border control is suicide. You can't just not check the people who come across your border.
You're gonna ended up.
Not just barbaric criminals, but entire armies could walk across.
I don't know about armies. There'd be some monitoring, but
did you see the footage of the young male Chinese just streaming across our border? And then they find biologic labs in California and Vegas now with, run by a guy who was getting funded by China. And
they weren't wearing uniforms.
The world is a dangerous place. The world is a dangerous place. There are people who want what we have. There are people who would just destroy us, and people who want power. And so that's just the world. I feel like it's also kind of like a blank out on the reality of the world and human beings and other countries. It's not Star Trek.
It's just a really evasive idea or concept to have open borders, because I can't think of one country in the world who has zero border control or border checks. Even Canada, you got to go through border checks. So what is the real point of arguing for open borders? It's just a fantastical intellectual exercise, in my view. It's not going to happen. Just on an instinctual level or intuitive level, people realize the need for controlling your borders. Where most nations have some sort of border control. And it's just for basic reasons like diseases and things, and checking for criminal records. You don't want to allow a whole bunch of criminals to flood into your country.
And that's what we did. For 4 years, we did that. And now we're cleaning up the mess. And when I watched that happen for 4 years, I knew that it wasn't going to be pretty reversing this. But I also knew if we didn't, we're dead. And I come from Minneapolis. I know what it's like when third worlders in mass are dropped into your town and what it does to your town. It destroys it. And it may not be the first year or the second year, but ultimately, and you can see that in Minneapolis, the place is a dump now. And everyone I know is like looking at moving. And these are people, Minnesotans don't move. And they're all looking to move because it's because of 100,000 Somalis. And so, and the consequences of that, which are, they make common cause with the communists and the corruption and all that stuff. When I was watching the flood, I'm like, well, that's literally it. That is the end of this nation. 10 million totally unvetted people coming in and joining probably the already 30 million here, maybe more, that we don't know who they are. And I'm sorry, but that's the end if we don't do something about it. That's enough to totally take us down.
Well,
Sunny,
there's a problem of assimilation. I think what you're getting at is the problem of assimilation. And if you allow this mass immigration from third world countries, then they tend to group together and form their own little communities, and they don't assimilate into American culture.
Well, and these are clan cultures. So, I mean, the Somalis in particular, they have tribes, the clans, and
did that to some extent. I don't mind that. It's the rate that it's happening, and it's how it's just unsupervised.
But when you import 100,000
Right.
from a clan culture, you're gonna get enclaves and clans. And even if you're a Somali who wants to, there have been many Somali whistleblowers, good people. And one of my personal heroes is Ayan Hirsi Ali. Go Google on YouTube what she's saying about all this stuff, because she realizes that these people are not compatible in mass, and we should only be taking the best and not huge groups and their families and their dependents. And there's something like an 88% welfare rate in that community, even 10 years after they're here. So they really don't add anything. They take.
Sunny, to your point about Europe and what's going on over there with the grooming gangs, in this last Yaron clip, he kind of acts like he's ready for strong vetting in Europe or with Muslims, but with a big condition.
So Wyatt says, weren't you calling for vetting EU migrants? Yeah, today we're at war. There's a war going on. And not all EU migrants, Muslims. I'm for vetting Muslims and for making sure they are not Islamists and kicking out. But that's because there's a war going on. And if I can't separate Muslims from Islamists, then ban all Muslim immigration. I have no problem with that when you declare there's a war. You'll notice that every time I say restricting migration of Muslims or monitoring all this, I also say that we need to declare war.
So to me, this one is important because, he used to claim that he was for U.S. vetting too, but Harry may tell him, we can't vet in Europe next. So I think it's insincere to have this disclaimer of when we declare war. He starts by saying they're at war. Then he gives himself this huge out by just saying none of it matters until, the EU politicians that created this policy now declare war on Islam. To me, it's like the wizard saying they just need to get the witch's broom first as a way of delaying them realizing that he has no power. But he doesn't mean it.
It's a very weird thing to declare war on an ideology. I mean, I kind of see that, but people hold ideas. People do.
Yeah.
And there's a cultural relativism in all of this that would also be in opposition to objectivism somewhat. I mean, um, we're talking about groups, and obviously there are individual exceptions, but we are talking about groups and cultures. And the American culture is exceptional, really exceptional in the history of mankind. And, I would think that people like Augustina, who've managed to make their way here, would want to prevent masses of her countrymen coming here because obviously she didn't like her country. So if we get, a million, if a million of her countrymen settle in her town, she's going to get her town or her country. And, the American system being a democracy and everything, it's, that's what happens. And you look at New York and what's going on there with Mamdani, and that, this guy is an immigrant who just got US citizenship and he's a communist Muslim. Like he's literally everything that's scary, and it's New York City. And, he was voted in by a lot of foreigners. So foreigners who are now here and citizens and voting. Who I think something like 50% of New York is foreign born. And most people in most other countries are socialists. I think Peikoff said that in that debate he had with Yaron too. He mentioned that.
The issue that he's saying at the beginning, we're at war, then he subtly changes to, oh, we have to declare war.
I don't even get any of that.
It's someone that doesn't mean what he says. It's like when he says, I never said vetting was authoritarian.
He did though.
William, thoughts? I didn't know if...
I think we should send ICE over to Europe.
There you go.
Hey, let me ask you guys a question. Would you support Trump? Like, let's say ICE wasn't even, let's say DHS didn't have a law enforcement arm. Do you think that Trump is in his authority to send the military to clear out some of these illegals?
I think there's an insurrection going on in certain cities, and he's in his right to declare an insurrection and to send in the military.
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. I just think that we do have ICE, and if we, to the extent there's an insurrection, it's coming from local politicians that refuse to enforce the law. I'd rather see them get arrested before bringing the military in.
Well, they will get arrested, but you got to declare them insurrectionists and then send in the military to arrest them.
There's some reason he hasn't done it. Once he does it, they're going to say, aha, you see, he's giving us martial law.
It's what they want, but I mean, at the same time, they are committing an insurrection. So it's like, I don't really know how we get out of this without violence. They are, I guess I'm kind of a states' rights person. If Minnesota wants to secede, they should. They either have to secede or they need to stop fighting federal law.
Minnesota hasn't voted to secede.
No, and nor would they, by the way, because the people who live there don't want to secede, and they actually support immigration law.
Sanctuary cities need to be outlawed for the ones that aren't seceding, and not just Minneapolis, but every blue state that doesn't want to follow the law.
Well, it's usually a big city, right, that causes all the trouble, and like Portland or whatever. So I think some of these cities that are either acting like insurrectionists or actually declaring themselves against federal officers or federal law, they need to be declared insurrectionists. And something needs to happen about it.
I'd also like to see illegals get debanked, and I'd like to see them crack down on employers and fine some employers, and and make it just harder to be illegal in the country. But that still wouldn't address the underground criminal illegal who's not a W-2, who's not doesn't have a bank at Wells Fargo. He's cash only criminal person. Those people still have to get arrested.
Well, there's a lot of deeper context here, like the drug laws. A lot of the illegal aliens are coming here, in violation of drug laws. And if we made drugs legal, then you wouldn't have as much trouble with these cartels and everything. But that's another issue. I mean, we still need to enforce the border and immigration laws. So I think some of the problem is caused by bad laws. But if we're going to be a nation of laws, we need to obey the law. And I don't think we should revolt as objectivists until we're basically overrun by communists, or we don't have the right to free speech and that sort of thing. I mean, Ayn Rand I don't think she was against resist a revolution until we lost the right to speak freely.
Yeah.
It wasn't about this ICE thing.
So in the meantime, you do have to follow the law, and there are mechanisms for changing law. And so what we're seeing in Minnesota, this Renee Good, Alex Preddy, everything they're doing, the insurrection, the Tim Walz, Jacob Frey actions are anti-rule of law.
Yeah. Well, they're anti-American. Anti-American.
Yeah,
it's just
anti-American.
They're being against ICE is just a consequence of them being against America.
Why do you think so? There are a lot of foreigners who are in favor of strong border security. Why do you think some foreigners aren't? Like, I can't really quite wrap my head around that, except they don't seem to trust law enforcement, which maybe comes from their cultures.
Maybe their socialist background, they got in with leftist groups supporting them when they came here.
Well, just like Americans, you can have capitalists and communist Americans. I think, and just like that, you can have foreigners who agree with capitalism or freedom, and then you have foreigners.
But like Agustina, her visceral reaction, right? She's having an emotional response, and when I had an au pair from France, and we went to this Easter egg roll with my kid, and the cops were there, and the fire truck was there, and the cops were giving out candy and stickers and little eggs, and and my nanny goes, this would not happen in France because the people's relationship with law enforcement is not positive. And so I thought, well, that's really interesting. I mean, it's France, it's the West, and yet they don't look at cops as heroes or people to look up to or anything. And so if you come from, that's France. So imagine how you feel if you're from a much rougher third world country, how you would feel about authority and law enforcement.
You bring up a great point about foreigners that are for the laws being enforced. People come here partially because of basic law and order, and they think it's going to be a good, safe place to raise their kids. The aberration is people that don't.
If you come from like a dictatorship or a very authoritarian nation, then your view of law enforcement would be skewed by that.
That's right.
So when you come to America, maybe it's hard to get over that bias.
Yeah, that's what I think.
But I think people who I was born and raised in America. I've been here my whole life. I've had very positive interactions with law enforcement. And we have individual rights here. We have a very strong culture surrounding those rights. So I think that, if you're a Native American born here, your bias is going to be in favor of law enforcement. So that I think that it might take an immigrant some time to get over their negative bias. And then if they see some video, especially if they're very emotional and it's
been clipped by the leftist media.
and they react emotionally, and you also jump to conclusions. You don't have a very strong base in reason or rationality or objectivity. And you see a video like Renee Good getting shot, you're going to jump to a conclusion that's going to be biased against law enforcement. And that could be the case with some immigrants.
Intellectuals.
Foreigners, a lot of foreigners don't have that bias. They have a very strong rationality, and they understand what's going on, and they can figure out the truth.
Great. Well, we talked a lot about a lot of really good ideas. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Go first, Sunny.
I think Minnesota should put secession up for a vote, and if they won't do that, they need to stop. I support ICE. I support what they're doing, and I don't want anyone killed, but I blame the left for that. I 100% blame the organized communist revolutionaries for what happened to those two people.
Yeah, I think that we need to support ICE and recognize that there are going to be questionable interactions, just like there are questionable interactions with legitimate police, local police. There's going to be questionable interactions with legitimate federal officers. So you need to recognize that. The problem we have with people like Harry Binswanger is they completely reject the legitimacy of border control and immigration restrictions and then therefore ICE. So we need to counter that with a strong case for the legitimacy of such things. And I think it begins with recognizing the idea that you can delegate your self-defense, your right to self-defense, your right to property to government officials. Because there is such a thing as group ownership. And so when you form a group like a city or a state or a nation, that those rights, you delegate some of it to your government representatives. And then they are in charge of monitoring the border, controlling who comes in and out of the land, and that sort of thing.
Can I just say something about that? Because I feel like listening to what you just said, one error that I think a lot of objectivists make is kind of not really understanding individualism, and they just have this kind of rationalistic, well, if it's not an individual each time, it's wrong, that they don't really believe in groups. And this causes them to make that kind of error that, what if you have a group that gets together and creates a town? Well, then I guess they don't have a border now. It's just this weird, because they're not individuals, and only individuals have rights. But individuals can form groups, and cultures are groups of individuals. And that's why cultural relativism isn't correct. And so people are coming from particular places. Yes, you should judge individuals in the context of your daily life or whatever, but a country has a right to have a policy, an immigration policy that is group-based. Somewhat.
Yeah, you can't have a group without individuals, but individuals can form groups. So there needs to be some recognition of groups, and that sometimes it's called public property. The group has a shared interest in the town, the property of the town, or at least the border of the town. And if the town has public roads, then you have every citizen or resident has an interest in those roads and who goes on those roads and the traffic laws of those roads and that sort of thing. So that's, I think, the central focus here is the way to defend groups or agencies like ICE is to recognize that they are representatives of our rights and our rights to manage the nation.
Great. Well, quick question for the comments section. If, whether or not if the Insurrection Act is applied, if it can be applied to intellectuals that incite people not to follow the law. Something to ponder. So again, I'm Scott Schiff along with William Swig and Sunny Lohmann. This is the Ayn Rand Fan Club, and we will see you next time.
See ya.